We'll go ahead and start and welcome other people as they come in maybe a little bit later. Today we welcome Christy Berghoef to third. Christy is, and I'll read the list that I put together here from different sites: speaker, mother of four, common good communications consultant, worship leader, contemplative photographer, musician, gardener, and former church planter. She wears many hats. And I haven't always met our speakers ahead of time when they come and we arrange and they're here on Sunday mornings. But I met Christy this summer in my kitchen. She was at my house for a writer's retreat. And I should also mention she's a writer. So welcome, Christy. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I understand you're doing kind of a series on home. And so I was telling a couple of people before this, I wear so many hats. When someone says, will you come and speak? I never know what I'm going to talk about, what they want me there for. And so when they said, will you talk about home? I said, yes. And this is the first I'm talking about home. So home, what is it? I've lived in several different places and have spent a good part of my life globetrotting. But somehow I seem to find my way back to the 40 acres of my childhood again and again and again. So first, let me just tell you what it was for me growing up on a 40-acre farm. I was raised on a small 40-acre flower farm just about 5 miles south of here. The farm I grew up on is the farm my dad grew up on. My grandparents moved to Holland from South Dakota in the 1940s, and they purchased this big old farmhouse on the 40 acres. When they got older, they cut off a small acre from the farm, built themselves a small house there, and our family moved into the big farmhouse, where my parents eventually started the flower farm. Well, my grandparents have passed now. My mom still lives in the farmhouse. She'll be 80 this year, and she's still farming the flowers. And my family now lives in the small house my grandparents built. Growing up, we didn't have a lot. We were always dressed in secondhand clothes. Often I wore my brother's hand-me-downs to school and that. We seemed to always be driving old cars that were on the verge of breakdown. We had few and simple gifts under the Christmas tree. Our vacations never involved airlines or cruise ships. Ours were road trips with a canvas army tent strapped on top of the station wagon that we would set up in the most inexpensive campgrounds we could find along the way. My brother recalls my mom crying at times, worried there wouldn't be enough to eat or they wouldn't be able to pay the bills that month. So we had a large vegetable garden and fruit trees and berry bushes. We canned and dried and froze our veggies and berries and fruits to get us through the winter. Mom made all our bread from scratch. Dad, Gramps, my brothers, they hunted for our meat, which was stored in chest freezers or salted and hung to dry in the smokehouse. Dad kept beehives for honey, and we tapped the maple trees in the woods, boiling the sap down to syrup in the sugar shack. So while my classmates came to school with Little Debbie snacks from the store racks, I showed up with carrot sticks from the root cellar. Not too many kids wanted to trade lunch items with me. But as a child, I really didn't feel that we were lacking. In fact, the whole 40 acres, the back 40, as I've come to affectionately call it, was my playground. While I never had all the nice things my classmates had, there's so much I did have. Truthfully, I grew up with an abundance, almost an embarrassment of riches. Out back, we had a pond for fishing and swimming in the summer, and in the winter we would ice skate across the surface. I spent hours watching the habits of bullfrogs, water skeeters, and water bugs swirling and whirling and diving with such grace and beauty, gold medals seemed appropriate. I would sit quietly and still in the cattails at the edge of the pond, watching the great blue herons, the muskrats, and the sandhill cranes. We also had several acres of woods. My dad made sure we knew all the trees by name, as did he when he was a child. We would watch for the ripening of the May apples. We knew well the giant basswood with the hollow cavity in the center of the woods in which a giant turkey vulture would lay her eggs every year. Dad cut trails through the woods for walking and biking. There's a creek that winds through the 40 acres. And we would ride the creek on a raft after the spring rains, and wild plums lined the creek bank. There were fields of flowers. There were row upon row of flowering shrubs and fruit trees and a wide field of alfalfa that rolled up a hill to the highest point on the farm. This spot in the alfalfa field at the top of the hill became a bit of a home for me. Here in the summer, I would lie on my back, watching the clouds roll over in the afternoon. Hours. In the winter, I would let the snow fall on me here. Amazed I was at how oddly warm it was. In the summer, we would often sleep under the stars. We'd throw down a tarp in the field, unroll our sleeping bags, watching the stars, pointing out the planets, naming the constellations. It was here that I realized how small and finite I am. It's here where I also thought about how large and loved I am despite my smallness. Dad would organize. My dad passed a couple of years ago, so excuse me. Dad would organize family meteor shower viewing events in which the aunts and uncles would come over, the cousins, their blankets and lawn chairs would be thrown down. And it became a big show as if it were a Broadway production. In fact, I spent so much time on my back in this spot. I remember when I was in elementary school, we had to fill out one of these things. When I grow up, I want to be, and I said, a cloud watcher. And my teacher said, oh, you want to be a meteorologist? And I said, yes, I want to be a meteorologist. I didn't know there was a big fancy word for this thing I wanted to do. And then I found out that what a meteorologist was, and I went back and I said, no, I literally just want to lay on the field and watch the sky. So I also walked barefoot everywhere. I knew the curves of the earth. I knew the dips and bends of the ground, knew where the thistles grew, where the pine cones lay scattered in the grass. I knew where to avoid the chestnut hulls, knew where the ground was sandy, knew where it was clay. I had a personal, intimate relationship with the back 40. The back 40 was and is home. Despite finding my home here on the back 40, despite feeling content and at peace in my small, wondrous world, that glimpse and recognition of my smallness that I had come to recognize on the hill in the alfalfa field grew in me a curiosity about the wider world, its peoples, languages, religions, and cultures. If I'm so small, I used to wonder, what else is out there? Well, eventually life happened. I went off to college, I moved away. I changed. I grew, and the more I saw of the world, the deeper a hunger grew in me to travel even more, to see and learn even more. My world just kept expanding. Well, over the next decades, I would travel all over the globe and live in a variety of places, but somehow I still always found myself coming home to the ground of my childhood for periods of time between living elsewhere, back to the 40 acres that I intimately knew, the 40 acres that intimately knew me back. And my upcoming book is a collection of essays in which I talk a lot about the farm, the back 40, and I'm going to read an excerpt from one of these essays. And just to set it up, this is, we had been living in Washington, D.C., and we were moving back home to Holland, this time with our 4 kids. So I was excited, thrilled to get to live in my grandparents' house, to raise my kids on the 40 acres I got to grow up on. But I was also conflicted because I had changed so much. I was concerned about how we would be received here. So my theology shifted, my politics was shifting. And, we just had been understanding some more of the complicated human realities and struggles that people outside of my hometown experience that I was completely unaware of before. After a long slog through Ohio, we finally crossed under the big blue "Welcome to Pure Michigan" sign. And I was jolted to full wakefulness by the notoriously hard-scrapple Michigan roadways, which tossed the van around like gravel tumbling down a wash plate. My mind began throwing down doubts again. What are we even doing here? Will they even want us back home? All my fears and questions were met with silence as I dodged potholes 6 inches deep. We should have moved somewhere else, I thought. I wondered if that war zone road pocked with dangerous gouges was a warning for what was ahead for our family. The kids began whooping it up in the back of the van, eager to live 2 flower fields and 1 alfalfa field away from Grandpa and Grandma, to be closer to their cousins, to roam the wild countryside I had been talking so much about, after being kept on a tight leash on one of the busiest DC streets where sirens screamed like packs of hungry circling hyenas day and night, and where shouting voices swam from open windows across the thick, hot soup of summer night air. In the thrill of adventure, they seemed easily able to embrace what was ahead and set aside the sadness of missing the friends and neighbors we had just left behind. I decided to make an effort to meet them in their enthusiasm and began the work of burying my grief, fears, and hesitations in order to dig out the little pockets of hope that were somewhere inside me that just maybe needed to be mined out. I joined them in pronouncing all the great things that were waiting for us in Michigan. Open fields, fresh air, small town, minimal traffic, great schools, a yard, a garden, Lake Michigan, Grandpa and Grandma, sublime, sacred silence. Maybe this would all be okay after all. The more mile markers the minivan trundled past, the more both my hopes and fears expanded inside me, and the more the breath felt squeezed out of my conflicting lungs. The confused state of my insides started spinning, bordering on nausea. It's going to be great. It's going to be terrible. Would the place and people of home ever allow me to really feel at home? We were no longer part of the tribe. I knew that. While our values hadn't changed, our political expression of those values had shifted as a result of the realities we had encountered and become aware of. In a conservative community, this would be enough, I knew, to make for a thorny existence. I knew this because there was a time I was part of the hometown crowd that demonized people who were exactly as I am now. Being politically liberal was one of the gravest of sins. It would be enough to be told by the wider community in a variety of ways that we were not welcome, we were not wanted, that we were outside the grasp of God's grace, and certainly outside the grasp of theirs. the increasing joy and excitement on the four little faces bobbing around in my rear view mirror offset my doubts and angst again. Somewhere on Interstate 96, I resolved to endure anything as long as my kids were okay. Keeping them feeling safe, loved, valued, grounded, and nurtured would be my goal. I gripped the steering wheel and found myself praying that the challenges of coming home would not shatter their sweet, enthusiastic little spirits. The landscape outside the window started to become familiar, like an old acquaintance at first, then like a longtime friend, and suddenly we were pulling into the gravel driveway, as familiar as a lover. We were home. We climbed out of the van, stretched the crimps out of our bones and muscles. Squealing, the kids skipped quickly inside like grasshoppers in the path of an oncoming combine. The screen door creaked open and slapped shut behind me. This was the house that would be our home, the home that my grandparents built and lived in the latter half of their lives, the home that sat at the edge of the 40-acre farm my dad grew up on, that I grew up on, that my kids would now grow up on, where my parents still lived. I was flooded with the warmth of nostalgia. It was unexpected. My dried up eyes started to draw from a restocked reservoir. My memory called up the lingering scent of date-filled cookies, mothballs, Grandpa's Big Chief tobacco, and Grandma's Avon skin cream. How were these scents still so palpable, given that Gramps and Grams had been gone for so long? Their smells must have saturated the carpet, soaked into the walls, or at least the walls of my memory. And I swear I could see Gramps, his bony frame tucked into the corner of the room, sunk in his brown recliner. A stack of books beside him on the table, checkerboard cracked at the seams, repaired with layers of brittle, yellowed masking tape, lying open and ready on a leather footstool. He would look up and call out to me, "Christy Ray, I've been waiting for you. Let's go. The board is ready." I could hear him as he always was. I could literally hear his voice coming from the corner of the room through his nearly toothless grin, wet tobacco wad set on the coaster on the table beside him. I squeezed my eyes against the tears, trying to escape, aching to turn back the years to simpler times when the world seemed a small and straightforward place to me, to sit at his feet and wait for him to slide the first worn wooden checker across the board. Home. Everything looked the same on the surface. Dark sienna living room carpet with smudges of rust color worked in. Dark walnut kitchen cabinets with brassy handles straight out of the 70s lining the sides of the tiny galley kitchen. I moved down the hall and peeked into the small bathroom. Mustard yellow tub, golden yellow floor tiles, just as they had always been. One bedroom with lime green shag carpet that was all the rage in 1978. And a second bedroom with more updated cream-colored Berber carpet. The kids scrambled downstairs to run around the wide open, unfinished basement. "We can ride our scooters and rollerblades down here," Winston shouted from the bottom of the stairs. I smiled at the thought and moved through the kitchen and out the back door. Stopping just beyond the edge of the yard, I kicked my shoes off. Stepping into the field, it sunk my cramped, caged feet into the warm, just turned soil of the back 40. The robins and blue jays were chattering wildly in the black walnut trees. Song sparrows fluttered at the bird feeder. I gazed across the field where acres of gladiolas were cracking through the soil, and my eyes lifted to the woods beyond. Inhaling slowly and deeply, the sun-warmed soil wrapped itself around my feet, and the breeze threw open its arms as if to say, "Welcome home." I let myself fall fully into this unconditional embrace. The earth knew me. A voice from somewhere whispered to my heart that this patch of earth would love me accept me, comfort me, and understand me. Just exactly as I was, in all my circumstances, regardless of how I fared in the world. Fresh air moved over the alfalfa field, carrying a hint of the neighbor's milk cows with it, before flowing easily and fully through my lungs. My clenched muscles relaxed and eased. All my twisted, anxious nerves unfurled. This was the ground that had birthed me, nurtured me, and held me all those years. And I knew then for certain this ground would hold me still. As I was standing there, easing myself into place, a small cloud of dust rose in the distance. I squinted as Mom and Dad emerged, rumbling across the field on the gator towards me. The kids ran from the house, squealing as their grandpa and grandma approached the yard. A smother of lanky little arms and legs wrapped around them like kite string knotted around a willow branch, and they were buried in affection. As that tight knot of love began to dissipate, Mom and Dad looked beyond my children to me, their open arms ready to embrace. I made my way across the yard and fell into them. I was home. It was that moment that my feet sunk into the soil, that I was overwhelmed with that deep sense of knowing I had found my way home. We've been home for over 10 years now. Life has been beautiful. And life has been very hard. But the earth has always been a loving home to me through it all. I'm going to read a short essay now, also from that collection, about what the Back 40 has been to us since we've come home. It's called Great is Thy Faithfulness. When the things of this world feel sad and weighty, and the very skin of the earth seems stretched and thin and tired and brittle, and bustling with more unkind activity than it was ever designed to carry, I wander the Back 40 where green things grow. When foolishness seems to be the wisdom of the world, the earth centers me back on what is good and right and holy and wise. When life's cruelties and disappointments beat me down to exhaustion, I get myself inside some patch of earthy aliveness, and that earthy aliveness gets itself inside of me. I become in every sense grounded. I lie in the fields and the grasses lift their strong, slender arms above me, catching their sleeves on the dim current of breeze, bending and swishing, choreographed sashaying. The curves of my body fuse and smolder into the soft curves of the earth. A familiar lover. The 2:00 cumulus clouds move down a well-worn causeway, heaped like cauliflower passed on a clear glass platter down a long dinner table, whose head is somewhere off in the distance, beyond the edge of the horizon, unseen. It's a slow, familiar procession across cerulean skies. Mourning doves rhythmically lift a stutter of lilting coos from their throats. Lullabies, sweet songs from the earth, balm for my wounds and a reminder to keep singing despite everything. I swallow the air and let all the weather, all the seasons, all the sorrow, all the joy of nature's fantasia and fury beat fully upon my wide open face. I embrace it, all of it, whatever comes, whatever falls, and it embraces me back. Morning, I find, is my favorite time to wander, to wonder. The earth seems the most fresh in the earliest hours, as it slowly rouses and the breath of night still lingers in the air. And the sky is a romantic smudge of caramel and peonies. Ribbons of fog settle in all the low places. At times, I'm certain it's just me and the world in these very early hours when all things seem possible. In spring, I walk through fields, letting the warm rain lick my cheeks like sweet cream butter, melting, rolling, sliding in small rivulets down fat, yeasty rolls fresh out of the oven. My bare feet squish through soggy, spongy fields with nutgrass and mud sieving through my toes. Life is breaking through the hard crust of winter all around me. Daffodils, crocus, tulips, forsythia. The orchards match the morning sky as I move my body down rows of apple, peach, pear, crabapple, cherry, and plum, blossoms bursting. China delicate blooms of dogwood ripple in the breeze while heaps of lilacs make me drunk and dizzy with their scent. The earth sucks up a million silvery liquid drops in a short moment and is refreshed. All things are new. The world hits reset. The dead begin to pulse with life and photosynthesize, rising up from the ground. Everything is resurrecting, and with it, I. Summer burns away the heavy ground-saturating rains. I'm bent over in the fields, tending to rows and acres of phlox, verbena, asclepia, zinnias, dahlias, and all the blossoms of summer. The dirt is warm under the naked skin of my feet. The ground pulses up through my body. My back aches, legs ache. Sweat runs freely, leaving streaks of salty residue down my sunburned cheeks. Somehow, I feel wholly unworthy of such noble and difficult work as this. Bent over, serving what comes from the ground, I tremble in the presence of so much majesty and miracle. At the end of the hot days, my exhausted body relieves itself, sleekly slipping headlong through the cool satin sheets of the back pond. Here, the residue of the day is washed off my body, and the unpleasant residue of my life seems to get washed away too. As the oak and the sugar maple slowly fade from emerald to crimson to apricot to burnt sienna to fleetly floating downward, released by the grip of trees, caught up in the swell and song of autumn breezes, they slip and dip through cracks in the air currents and make their mosaic on the ground. I lie in that holy ground as it spins through space, watching the winnowing trees strip their garments around me. Light filters through colors above me in a way no stained glass window ever managed. My back arcs to meet the tumble of leaves, and I inhale the scent of all this earthy decay. Inhale, exhale. The forest sheds what is old here, and so do I. Winter comes. Snowflakes fall, float, tumble, and roll. Tiny, intricate works of art crocheted for only this moment. A blessed gift for whomever happens to be paying attention. These glimmering masterpieces bury the now brown edges of autumn. The snowy field becomes an oddly warm bed to lie in as the white sky floats down around me and over me and right inside of me, nibbling at my cheeks with a flirtatious tenderness. The earth is soft and quieted, and I with it. May I learn to embody for the world all that the earth has embodied for me. Here I am grounded. Here where my roots stretch down through the soils of the earth. Here where the roots of the earth stretch up into the soils of me. Great is thy faithfulness, this earth. So what is home? I think the right answer I'm supposed to say in a church is that we find our true home in God, in the Creator, in the divine. And that can take many shapes and comes in many forms. For me, in many ways, I've experienced the earth as the embodiment of God. The earth welcomes me despite everything. It loves me, teaches me, inspires me, brings me to my knees in awe and holy wonder. She is faithful. My home is in her. This is something I've sensed since I was a young child, but never had the words to describe or explain it. I just knew it. In the Reformed tradition, the doctrine that came the closest in speaking this to me was the doctrine of general revelation, that we can come to know God and worship God through creation. Upon first learning about general revelation, I remember saying to my catechism teacher at Grafska CRC, where I grew up, general revelation, this is all I need to know. The rest of it I don't need. The rest of it makes us argue and split and splinter and be quick to judge everyone who's come to a different knowledge and understanding of the finer points of doctrine. Just give me general revelation. Looking up at the sky, all of us, throughout time and across space, across religion and nationality, experience a deep, worshipful awe of Creator God who goes by many names. We experience unity in the presence of such divine love. We sense the grace and abundance of Creator God, all of us. I'm at home when I am in God and God is in me. When I am in the earth and the earth is in me. The biblical narrative also tells the creation story of humans being scooped from the ground. And I think this is so beautiful. People created and shaped out of clay. Our DNA is the DNA of the earth. She is our mother in a sense, Mother Earth. Created in the image of God, our bodies were birthed from the womb of the earth. And someday our bodies will be buried back into the folds of her flesh. We'll be close again to the thumping of her heart. I know I won't be calling the back 40 home forever. Even though I could remain on our 1 acre, the corner of the farm, for a long time. But my husband and I are church planting pastors, and pastors move. I know this. This is the reality. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and someday my mom will pass away too. And probably the back 40 will go up for sale. And as sick as I feel thinking about it, given the reality of real estate, it's not something that will ever be in our budget. Likely it will get bought up by a corporate farm, and they'll plow up the perennials, cut down the trees, and bury the 40 acres in genetically modified corn or soybeans or whatever the profit crop happens to be when the time comes. It's really hard for me to think about that. I can't predict how it will impact me when that day comes, but I do wonder, where will I come home to when that happens? But also, the older I get, the more I find myself wanting to go smaller, to have less, to climb down that ladder of American success instead of climbing up, to hold loosely or even letting go of an abundance of possessions, maybe even including the possession of land, maybe. Increasingly, I find myself wanting to remove the distractions of all the stuff that separate me from the earth. Modern conveniences that can sometimes make me forget the essence of who I am because they distance me from the source of life. I find myself in deep reflection and introspection about what it is that disconnects me from my true home and how to let go of some of those things that get in the way. Also, the earth is enormous and diverse and magnificent. Its beauty stretches far beyond the back 40. I've increasingly done a lot of traveling, and I'm finding myself surprisingly the most at home when I'm on the move.
Hey, Jim.
When I travel simply and with everything I need in my rucksack.
All right, how are you?
When I'm hiking, doing long walks for days, even weeks. When I'm living without all the distractions of a settled life, I'm able to see more of the captivating things that are all across the earth.
High Street.
I'm constantly attuned to the discovery of new things about our wondrous planet, and this draws me into worship and holy wonder of a magnitude that's impossible to string together the words to describe. I'm beginning to realize that I'm home when I'm anywhere and everywhere close to the earth. I'm home when I'm in what most might assume is nowhere at all. So what is home for me? It's the natural world. The natural world is my home. She is steadfast, grounding, godly, life-giving, inspiring, faithful, a shelter, a provider. She's predictable. I can relax in her arms and be awed by her strength and power. She humbles me. She lifts me up. She listens to my fears, my heartbreak, my worry. She speaks wisdom and assurance to me when I'm willing to sit and listen. She bears and carries more than is humanly possible. She welcomes me with an unconditional embrace, regardless of the weather, her weather or mine. She holds me close in every stage of who I am and who I am becoming. She is my home. Thanks so much for your time.
We're not freezing them off.
Things didn't get diseases and drugs didn't get zapped as much as they do in our winter.
We have time for questions or comments back. Christy, thank you so much for such a personal look at that connection with home.
Yeah, there's not much we can do.
This rain is going to help.
This rain is huge.
It's going to help us, but I don't think we're going to.
So, coming back to a place you know so intimately, what was most surprising to you when you actually got here?
But, you know, we're getting to the time where we need to blow it out, too. So we're probably going to.
I think I would have to say what was surprising to me the most is the reciprocal nature of my relationship to the earth. And, you know, I grew up on this lovely farm. It is a stunning 40 acres. There's a lot of 40-acre, you know, just flat squares. This is a stunning 40 acres. And my dad passed 2 years ago. And he built this flower farm and these, you know, planted these fruit trees and these shrubs. And he had a deep connection to it. He knew it, it knew him. And one of the things that was so surprising is when he passed, how quickly, like the land felt his loss. We felt his loss walking the land. And, you know, coming to realize the reciprocal nature of his relationship to the earth and how much the absence of him impacted the farm. And so, for example, my dad loved the monarch butterfly, and he wanted to do everything he could to help preserve the monarch butterfly. And so he would leave all the milkweed. He would he would plow around them, he would disc around them. He told all the kids that worked for him, weed around them, don't take out the milkweed, we need the milkweed. The butterflies need it. And when he passed, the farm got considerably smaller, the flower business. And so the neighbors started renting out some of the land and they just plowed everything down. And oh, that was so hard to watch. And I realized, you know, when you have a relationship with the land flourishes. And you can see when there's not really a relationship there, the same care isn't taken. That's been one of the biggest surprises for me, I guess, in recent years.
First, a comment, Christy, thank you. Thank you for the description of what that earth has meant to you and for the memories. It was so easy to get immersed in your use of words and what that triggered for all of us, I think, in terms of memories of home as well. So thank you for those descriptions. I'm wondering what you've learned in that process of trying to reconnect in the midst of the changed you that can help all of us who kind of lose our centeredness by all the periphery around to regain that. How have you helped yourself reconnect and remain centered in that way?
Yeah, so this is kind of the work of my life now, getting centered, helping other people get centered. And I will say for me, when we first moved back, so I was coming from a place where I was heavily involved in politics and heavily involved in justice issues. And we came back and we were exhausted. So we just kind of, forget the world. I am just here now in my garden on the back 40, wandering around, enjoying all of it. But then it's not that enjoyable after a while because you know about the world that's out there. So I had this constant back and forth of now I'm fully in the earth. Now I'm fully back in the world fighting for justice. Now I'm fully back in the earth. Just forget the world, enjoy and so then eventually I realized I need to have one foot in each at all times. I can't forget the world. I need to know what's going on. And the earth can inform us how we ought to behave in the world. I firmly believe that. We have so much to learn. I mean, the earth can be a teacher about community and how, ecosystems, if you just sit and observe an ecosystem and see the way all these plants and bugs and everything take care of each other, we can do that in the world. But yeah, we let our, ambitions and all kinds of things get in the way and drive us off course, and the things get imbalanced and society suffers as a result. So I'm more effective, I would say, in the world when I am also balanced in tune with the earth. But I can't stay just in the earth. I have to have a foot in the other world as well.
Christy, I can't wait for your book to come out. Is it going to be soon?
Spring.
Spring. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you it's very moving. And I think, as Dave said, triggers in all of us thoughts and reflections. When I hear your writing, I think Wendell Berry, I think Annie Dillard, I think Mary Oliver.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could just share with us some of the other writers and thinkers that continue to inform and inspire you, especially now as you're thinking of this tension between being grounded in the earth and also being aware of the world and all the issues.
Yeah, well, you've just named some of them. Certainly Wendell Berry has been a huge influence. And in fact, in the introduction of my book, I talk about my two celebrity crushes in high school. One being Wendell Berry, who Mark Hiskis introduced me to, a poem by Wendell Berry. And the other was Rick Steves. So I was a little bit nerdy, but I still love those two so much. And, one has me remembering this giant world that's out there and the beautiful things that are to be found in cultures and, religions and all over the world, while the other, who cares and tends for his own little plot of land, just moves me to no end. So I still love those two. I won't say I have a crush on them anymore, but I do still love those two a lot. Yeah. Oh, yeah, thanks. So I finished my doctoral work last spring, and thank you. Yeah, and was encouraged by my advisors to start a Substack. And so this is where you can find where I'm regularly writing about the back 40, about what's, sometimes it's what's going on with the chickens or the flowers or things like that, but also observations about the world and how the earth informs things that we should maybe be doing in the world. So you can find that there. I left it on your seat for you to look it up.
Before you left the 40, you commented about how you were part of that culture or tribe. And as you were coming back, you commented on concerns about how you were a different person post-Washington, D.C. than you were before. Over these last 10 years, give us a couple of mile markers of those cultural differences or how you've dealt with those differences.
It's a big question. So, when we first moved back, a couple things. Our theology had shifted. After we went to Calvin Seminary, my husband and I, And when we took our first church planning call, we realized, oh, we have to really understand the Bible now. We have to teach it every week, And so we started really diving deep into the cultural, historical, linguistic aspects of the Bible. And that began to cause our theology to open up and to realize how complex this book is. And people have been warring about it and arguing about it and having different ideas about it for centuries, since its inception, essentially. And so that caused a shift. And we knew that would be a hard one coming back here. And then our politics shifted, in part because our theology shifted. It led to a shift in our politics. And when we lived in Washington, D.C., we were suddenly exposed to all kinds of things the back 40 never exposed me to. This town never exposed me to. And so I often say that the values that were instilled in me here, from the people here in this place, have never left me. In fact, I'm trying to take them very seriously. And that's why my politics has shifted. And so when we interact with people here and these, questions come up, and you probably know my husband ran for US Congress a bit ago. When those things come up, I try to always focus on that and to remind people our values, have not changed. And let's talk about the issues. Can I tell you stories about what I've seen? Can I tell you about the people we encountered in our ministry in other places and how they're living and the struggles they have, and how maybe the politics that are being supported here are hurting them, are harming them, even though we don't see that here because we don't experience that here. So those are the kinds of conversations that, we've been having a lot of. And I started doing a lot of civil discourse and political discourse consulting and doing retreats and things just to get people talking and learning how to do that better. So.
After all the eloquence, poetry, and wisdom, I'm going to try to ask a decent question. You've mentioned the word politics. You've mentioned the word coming home. You've mentioned the change that you bring back home. How do you advise us to work with those deep differences that have been so planted in so many ways, in so many directions, to help begin to understand each other and to listen to each other and to learn?
There's a lot I could go into here, but I think something I find helpful is to remember my views were formed because of a whole journey I've been on, because of the places I've lived, the people I've encountered, the stories I've encountered. And everyone has a path like that. And not everyone has encountered the same kind of experiences. So when I go into a conversation with someone who has a different view, who maybe supports a policy that I know is harmful to people over there, I go in, first of all, knowing that I trust that they have the best interest of everyone at heart. But they're basing their views on what they know, what they read, what they watch, what they've seen, what they've experienced. And that's true of all of us. I'm sometimes wrong. Like, I know I am, because I've done one path, and there's all kinds of paths that I haven't walked, I haven't encountered. And so to go into any conversation with that kind of humility, I think is essential. To be able to say, I know that I'm sometimes wrong, and what can I learn from this person? And to listen to them, and to remember we're all human, and to go in giving people the benefit of the doubt, which I think we just don't do anymore. Our political climate is so toxic. We tend to go in just to say how wrong a person is or to prove how wrong a person is without listening to their story. I have very different views from even people in my family. But I love them and they love me, and I know they're good people. They have those values still that they cling to as well, but they're basing their political involvement on what they know. So for me, it's always listening. I want to understand someone before I go in with, here's my experience and here's what I've seen. So.
Okay, one quick addition. Do you take the initiative when you have reason to do so? And if so, how?
Do I take the initiative in conversations? Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, I'll be honest. And sometimes I should, and I don't. Sometimes I know that nothing is going to come of something, or it's going to increase angst and tension and bad feelings. And sometimes I don't, and I should. And I know I should, but I don't want to be uncomfortable. Right? Because I'm human too. Really. I mean, sometimes that's too hard. I don't want to do it. We don't even know if we're going to put a yard sign up this year, a political yard sign, even though we feel so strongly, because the last time we did, there were all kinds of threats that I can't even say on camera, against our because we live out in the country. It's generally out there where we live, it's Trump country. And so we had a lot of harassment and vandalism, and, our kids got bullied. It was awful. And so this year, with the stakes this high, we don't even know if we're brave enough to put a sign out. So that's an instance where maybe we should, but I don't know if we will, because it's just, you think about your family's safety and your safety. And, we had to move out of our house a couple times during the last election. And so sometimes I think for my own self-preservation, I step back, even though there's a voice in my head saying, really? You're worried about suffering? Look how those people are suffering. So that is a constant conflict that I personally do face. And there are people who are much braver than me and, who are really doing good work at going out there and saying what needs to be said, and some who don't shy away at all, but I sometimes do.
Well, thank you so much, Christy. We just really appreciate your kind of honesty and insights and sharing with us. So let's thank her again. Just one more thing. Next week, we have Pastor Ryan with us, and he's going to be talking about home, why now? Why this topic that our pastors have chosen for this theme? What are the stories behind it, the vision, and kind of a overlay for this semester? So thank you.